Hi, this is Chris Sarandon, and welcome to Cooking by Heart.
Just step out.
I couldn't believe the tastes and the flavors.
Lydia Bastianich.
Where we revisit the vivid memories of the food we grew up with and the people and the stories attached to that time in our lives.
I was the one sort of like mommy dearest.
My guest today is the multi-talented actor and voiceover artist, Tony Todd. Tony began his film career as Sergeant Warren in the highly acclaimed film Platoon, and portrayed Kern in the television series Star Trek: The Next Generation, and also Kern on Star Trek: Deep Space Nine, as well as having played other characters in the Star Trek universe. He achieved stardom for his role as Ben in the remake of The Night of the Living Dead, and as the title character in the 4 films of the Candyman series, and in auteur-director-producer Jordan Peele's version of Candyman. He starred as William Bloodworth in the Final Destination franchise, and also starred in the film The Man from Earth. In addition, Todd has appeared in more than 100 theatrical studio movies, small gem films, and television movies. He's also lent his voice to countless animated classics, including as the Fallen in Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, and has voiced many documentaries, including Invisible Threads, From Wireless to War. Todd has also acted on and off Broadway in plays by legendary playwrights August Wilson and Athol Fugard, in addition to countless starring roles in theaters across the country. On television, he's appeared as a guest star on Boston Public, Law & Order, Xena, Warrior Princess, The X-Files, Psych, Criminal Minds, Charmed, Smallville, and countless others. I'm thrilled to present Tony Todd. Hi, Tony. How are you?
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you, Chris. I've been dying to chop this up with you for a while now.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing
like
this for
parsley,
a while.
Baby.
Yeah.
Parsley.
You're right with the food theme of the show, Tony.
There you go. I love your coffee cup, your Greek coffee cup background. That's fantastic.
Oh, isn't that great?
It reminds me of those old days, baby.
Yeah.
Crossing
Yeah.
the east side to the west side with that.
That's
only
right.
that to keep you warm.
That's right. Manhattan, the emblematic deli coffee cup from all the Greek delis and restaurants in New York City.
Absolutely. My favorite was down on 4th and 6th.
Oh, yeah?
In the village, yeah.
Oh, downtown. Yeah. Normally, I start the show with asking my guests about their provenance, where they're from, because so much of the way we grow up in the culinary world has to do with where we started. So you were born in D.C., Washington,
Correct.
D.C.? Yeah.
Washington, D.C.
And did you spend most of your formative years there?
No, I left. I was raised by my aunt who rescued me when I was 3 and brought me to Connecticut.
Whereabouts in Connecticut?
In the north end of Hartford, Connecticut. Primarily a black neighborhood, but Hartford was so small that all the races commingled. A huge Puerto Rican environment with the mofongo, and obviously a huge Italian area. Right. Some of the best grinders ever eaten. Franklin giant grinders. I remember it. Whenever I'm in town, I have to stop in.
All right. Well, we'll get to the grinders in a minute. So tell me about your aunt.
My aunt couldn't have children, and my mother wasn't prepared to raise me at the time, so she insisted that she take me over, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her, because not only did she rescue me, but she made sure that I avoided gang life, because I was an only kid.
Yeah.
The way she did that was every summer she would put me in another program, whether it was geology, Boy Scouts, creative thinking. Every summer, my mind was occupied at another museum in the Connecticut area, until ultimately I ended up in a theater camp. And that's when the bug
the bug bit. Right.
Yeah. Right. Better than getting a fishing pole.
Right. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But by the way, what a brilliant strategy of hers.
Yes, she was wise. And her job, she worked as a domestic for rich people in Glastonbury, Windsor, Rocky Hill. And occasionally she would take me with her to work. And all these places had enormous libraries. which is where I was plopped down and I learned how to read really fast and just savor the words and the images of great writers.
Mm-mm. Tell me your aunt's name.
Her name was Clara Ellison, Aunt Clara. I still remember our home phone number.
Interesting, isn't it? How we would remember those particular things. What was your phone number when you were a kid?
525-8516.
Right. Only 7 digits.
Yes.
I'm old enough that I remember having a 4-digit phone number.
Wow.
Yeah.
Don't tell me you remember the crank, too.
No,
come on.
No. I don't go back that far. All right. So tell me about your aunt's cooking. Okay. What are the things that you remember?
Yeah, I remember everything. I didn't even realize we were poor until I was around 13 because she always made sure I had a hot meal. Right. Her husband was Jamaican, so there was a lot of influence of that. And she came from South Carolina. So fried chicken was prominent. I no longer eat pork, but she used to serve pork chops and smothered neck bones and the best potato salad in the world. Banana pudding with the vanilla wafers was that special dessert. And boy. I don't eat it any longer, but tapioca with Jell-O on a Sunday was amazing. Fresh whipped ice cream. And she got me cooking when I was 13. I said, and Clara, I really wanted to try baking a cake because she had a Betty Crocker's cake book. And she said, are you going to clean the kitchen? And I said, I'm going to do my best.
Yeah.
3 hours later, 6 eggshells all over the kitchen table and frosting on the walls. But I made my first cake, which is kind of creative.
Yeah.
How we do our rolls, right?
Yeah.
It's the ingredients that are necessary, the proper assembly, and the finished product.
Exactly.
Thank you for asking that question. And a lot of Kool-Aid.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wasn't healthy eating,
right?
But enough sugar to keep the energy going and enough starch to just keep the muscles growing,
Yeah, exactly. So what was it like around the dinner table?
It was just me and her. She separated from her husband when I was maybe 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. So from 5 to 15 or so, it was just me and her. And in those days, it was before cable. Right. So we had the 8 o'clock movie, the 10 o'clock movie. We used to watch together the 8 o'clock movie every night. And in those days, they didn't mess around with trash. There were always quality films.
Right.
And she used those as conversation pieces to, like, for example, we would watch White Heat and she would question me, who's the bad guy? Who's the good guy? Why are they bad? Why are they good? And those were her ways of giving me morality lessons. And also, it cemented my love of film.
Right.
I can remember when I was 9 watching Sunset Boulevard for the first time.
Wow.
And understanding it in some prolific way.
Yeah.
So
then you guys would sit at the table and have dinner together.
We would have dinner at the table. We're in the dining room. And then we'd sit on her favorite chair and I'd be on the couch and with commercials, we'd watch these incredible films. All classics, by the way.
What were the more memorable meals that you remember from your aunt?
Fried chicken.
Fried chicken.
The best fried chicken in the world. The best. And then, it was crispy. I can't, chicken.
Have you tried to recreate it?
I have. A lot of her recipes, I can't master how she did it. It was always crispy. It was never greasy.
Yeah.
It was flavorful. Mm-hmm. A lot of people try to make fried chicken, but a lot of people fail. It's like, it's got to have a proper balance of crust, taste, proper temperature, seasoning, etc.
Right. Other than the sort of every night meal, what was it like, for instance, when you were off to school? Did she send you off with school lunch? Or did you get school lunch at school?
I think you paid 30 cents a day for the school lunch, something like that, maybe a quarter even.
And what was the typical lunch at school?
American chop suey.
Oh, really?
It's just ground beef and pasta and red sauce. But at that time, I was really into dessert, so there was a lot of trading going on at public schooling,
Trading, ubiquitous conversation with most of my guests about school food.
I'll give you my French fries for that piece of chocolate cake.
Right.
There were days when I would have 3 pieces of cake, so I was really high strung, but it fed my creativity. Yeah, I was zooming, but it wasn't in a negative way, and it wasn't diagnosed. It was just energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
which fed into my creativity.
And what were your outlets? What were your creative outlets?
I had a growth spurt between freshman and sophomore year. I grew 6 inches, and my voice went from here and to where it is now. It was but it totally threw off my ecosystem.
Right, your metabolism, right.
Yeah, I couldn't walk down the hallway without tripping into a locker. And all the athletic coaches, they would see me and they would just shake their heads.
Now, for my listeners and viewers who've never stood beside Tony, Tony's a tall guy. You're what, about 6'3", 6'4"?
6'4".
6'4".
I used to be 6'5". I'm 6'4".
Yes, we do shrink as we get older.
We do. It's
Tony?
true.
Yeah, I used to be 6 feet tall at one point. At any rate, so there you are, stumbling down the hallway.
Yeah.
And so we're never picked for sports.
I was on the swim team. That I could do because I was so tall. I died. I'm halfway across, but it wasn't fun because no girls showed up for that sport. All the girls went to the basketball players and the football players.
Right.
And I wanted to be part of that club, but fortunately, though, English teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, I'll never forget her. She says, "I got a gift for you that I'm going to bring in tomorrow." And I said, "What is this?" She said, "Shh." And the next day, she brought me in a copy of Shakespeare's The Tempest. Okay,
wow!
And it was like finding the treasure at the end of the rainbow, man. Up until then, I was reading comic books and great novels, but I had never read a play before, and it just made total sense to me. How it was written, how it was laid out, how one scene led to another. Yeah,
and you were how old at this point?
Oh, geez, I was 13 because I just finished the Boy Scouts. And when I was with the Boy Scouts, I went to the World Jamboree, which is a rare occasion. And that year, Tokyo. It was my first time on a plane, but I digress. So I was 13, and she gave me that. Next thing you know, I said, how can I prepare to study this? And there happened to be a drama program, which was run by the biology teacher. And I joined that, and I never looked back.
That was it.
Yeah.
Oh boy!
Snacks in the green room.
Yeah, and I think all of us, including not only my guests, but also a lot of my listeners and my viewers, have had the same experience with a great teacher at some point in our lives.
Gotta have one.
Who sent you off on a path that changed your life, which is quite extraordinary. It occurs to me also as you talk about some of these summer programs. Now, were you at home when you were doing these programs, or were you off doing them?
No, they were day programs. So,
okay.
Yeah, so I would always come home, and then she would encourage my learning by asking me, "What did you learn today?"
What a remarkable woman.
How about that, huh?
Your aunt.
Yeah.
Is she still with us?
No, unfortunately, she passed in the 90s. But before she left us, one of her favorite film forms were Westerns. And I booked a Western for CBS with Christopher Reeve called Black Fox. We did 3 of them. It was going to be a series, but during our break, Christopher unfortunately had his accident.
Yeah. But
she had never been on a plane before. And I said, "I'm flying you first class up to Calgary." She says, "No, baby, I'd rather take the bus." I said, "You're taking the plane." When she landed, she cursed me out. And then the crew built her a special staging platform where for 2 weeks she watched her baby boy ride horses, stagecoaches. It was an incredible moment for us both.
Oh, how wonderful.
She gave me the biggest hug that I ever had, saying, "You're going to be all right."
Wow.
Yeah. Just eat good food.
Yeah, exactly. So let me get a little more into the neighborhood you grew up in. Primarily a mixed neighborhood?
No.
Ethnically mixed, or an African-American neighborhood?
It was African-American and Spanish. Hartford is they're distinct neighborhoods, but there was no conflict. Right, exactly. Puerto Ricans lived on Park Avenue, blacks lived in the North End, Italians lived in the South End. Right. So when you were young, were you exposed to food from the various ethnicities that you were? I met this guy in high school named Terry Poland, who ultimately became a cop. He says, "Man, I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to take you to this Italian grinder shop called Franklin Giant Grinder." And he took me, and they embraced me. They still have a picture of me in the wall. I don't know if you've ever been there. Did you ever work at Hartford Stage Company? I did.
I did long time ago, very early in my career when I was just doing
That's
research.
where I saw my first play, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
The Trial of Abraham Lincoln. I'll never forget that.
Oh, wow.
And Boys in the Band. I saw that there.
Yeah.
Early. Yeah.
For our viewers and listeners, tell them what a grinder is.
A grinder
What
is
consists of?
basically an Italian sandwich that was designed for truck drivers and cab drivers. It was like a meal on a long piece of fresh baked Italian bread, meatball, all beef, sliced by this vibrant Italian woman, splattered on the bread with provolone cheese and just marinara sauce.
Oh, yes.
Telling you, not only is it filling, but it tastes like you're eating meat candy. So it satisfies all the way around. You're full.
Boy.
Like I grew up fishing a lot as I got older and my teens. And there's like 100 lakes in Connecticut. So we must have investigated everyone. And one of our things to do was to pick up a couple of grinders and then go out on the lake.
And go out and fish. And what did you catch?
Mostly bass, pike, baby perch, but those are useless. They just bite a lot. But we went for bass.
Yeah.
I didn't do the shad roll stuff. That came later in my life, and that was when I was a full-time student doing my master's.
So you went fishing early on?
Yeah, like between 14 to my early 20s.
And you brought
I would
fish?
bring fish home.
Right.
My aunt, at first she would clean it, and then she'd say, I got to teach you how to clean fish.
Right. Which is not an easy thing to do, by the way.
No, it's not. And she did the two things she insisted on is clean the kitchen after I tried to make a mess and to clean my own fish, which I learned.
Yeah. And how did she prepare the fish?
Salt, pepper, baby, lemon.
That's it.
Yep.
She'd fillet the fish?
She would fillet it and then season it and then
pan fry it?
Either pan fry or bake. She'd like to switch it up.
Right. Any particular seasoning or just salt and pepper?
Salt and pepper, a little paprika. A little onion powder.
Oh.
It was delicious.
Sounds nice.
We had a woman in, Hartford, as small as it is, has great food. Besides Franklin Giant Grinders, there was a woman called Mrs. Johnson's Fish Shack on Capon and Barber. Best whiting. She used whiting fish sandwiches, where she would pile it high. You get either a 3-piece, a 4-piece, or a 5-piece sandwich for $5 at that time.
Wow.
Right?
How was the fish prepared? Was it fried?
Fried, deep fried.
Deep fried.
Not overly fried. It was still light and fluffy and hot and fulfilling. And because, you had a mixture of creative people, you had your junkies, and some people, it was the only meal they could afford per day. And it was filling, for everybody.
Oh, sounds amazing.
Yeah. A little hot sauce, a little tartar sauce.
Yeah. There's something about a fish sandwich with tartar sauce that's just so satisfying.
You remember those days in New York when the Muslims had the fish markets all over town? And it's $3 or something for an actor. That was like an invitation. Right. So then after Connecticut, so you go off to college? I went to UConn, but UConn's program was heavily musical theater, and that wasn't my forte.
Right.
So I dropped out and I joined this experimental theater company, the Mobius Theater, doing like Sam Shepard stuff and, experimental work.
Much more experimental, right?
Yeah, and I had an experimental lifestyle. I mean, I was basically out of school. I lied to my aunt and said I was. And I remember an actress, friend of mine, one day she gave me a brochure for Eugene O'Neill Theater Center. And I said, I can't afford this, what are you talking about? As I'm eating some popcorn that we had made. And she says, you should try. And I'll never forget her for doing this. And I went there. First thing I told them is, I can't afford this. And they said, we want you. So all we asked is that you pay it forward. And I got a full scholarship to there. And then subsequently to Trinity Rep in Providence, where I got my master's. All on their dime. And I've been paying for it ever since.
Was Lloyd Richards in charge of? Yeah. Yes,
Lloyd. I remember doing a scene for him from Golden Boy. He let me speak for 30 seconds, shut it off, and then used me as an example to the class for the next 2 hours, and then took his arm around my shoulder, walked me around the lake, and explained why he'd used me as an example. I'll never forget that.
The great teachers, when they
don't let
happen
you
in our
bullshit.
lives. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So then you ended up in New York?
I ended up back in Hartford because I asked the mayor for a list of all the incorrigibles because I wanted to practice what I had been taught. And I taught theater after school for a year in Connecticut until I realized that I needed to be in New York.
And how long were you in New York?
I arrived with my wife at the time in 1980. And I remember our rusty Saab broke down just as we got to the city.
Oh.
I had to crash at a cousin's house who was a flamboyant clothes designer. And I got a Village Voice the next day and I saw an ad. This is back when you had ads for acting in the back of the Village Voice or show business and backstage, right? And there was a new theater on 20th and Chelsea. And I ran over there, I got the gig, and I got my equity card within 5 days.
That never happens. Well, it by the way, it did happen to me, but it doesn't often happen to people.
That's the two of us, okay? That means that we were designed for something special.
Yeah. Or getting an agent right away.
Well, I had to freelance a lot.
Yeah.
I remember, I did, I didn't trust a lot of those guys.
Yeah, understandably. Now, in your work, you've obviously been on a lot of locations, right? You've been out and around all over the country, all over the world, perhaps? Can you share some of your culinary experiences while you've traveled for work?
One city that I seem to return to a lot, I shot in Vancouver at least 30 times, BC. Yeah. And BC is a food mecca.
British Columbia, right.
Yeah, I'm sure you've been there. The Granville Market was my first exposure to a market that represented world cuisine, and discovering things like salmon candy, which is basically dried pieces of salmon and then sweetened with honey and cayenne. And Native Americans used to chew that to keep their strength. Another significant destination was my first time in Africa, Nairobi. And I've been there 4 times since. And I'm going to tell you, the portions in Africa, unlike America, everything's big. And one thing I learned about shanty towns, which are basically the ghettos in Africa, if one family has a chicken, everybody on each side of the house, in the front, the back, the side to side, eats.
They share.
Yeah. And that's a philosophy that
they look out for each other.
Great. Yeah, it's amazing. And we're talking about corrugated steel siding, okay? But it's tribal, I guess, in terms of how the food is collected and how it's shared. And recently, I had to go to Stockholm. Very recently, I had to go there 5 times in 2 years for a video game project. And our last meal there was at a place called the Opera House, which is a 3 Michelin star place and 5 different chefs cooking individually.
Wow!
So I've become, I am a foodie.
One would think. Yeah, one would think.
I try to duplicate. I'm not as good as I think I am.
Yeah.
But I get by.
But you do cook. Yeah,
I do cook. Yeah. I cook. And I experiment with smoothies, teas, all the things you don't think about when you're a kid.
Yeah, right. Do you entertain? Do you have people over? Do you cook for people?
Yes, I do. Assorted girlfriends, not all at once. But
right. Yes, spread the love.
That's one of the first ways I get to impress someone.
Yeah.
Is to show that I can put ingredients together in simple complexity, I call it.
That's a nice expression.
And with the right wine.
Yeah.
And it's a form of seduction.
Any specialties?
My go-to would be making a pasta dish, bolognese, but with onions, sweet onions, peppers, of course, garlic over a nice chosen pasta. I like different designs in my pasta, so I'll choose something appropriately sexy and pair it with, I'm in California now, so there's a great wine place where we get discount wines, 30% off, a really good wine.
Right. Also, the wonderful thing about living in California is the fresh produce all the time.
Oh, my God. I go to all kinds of markets. I go to a Japanese market.
Yep.
I go Mexican, of course, is a heavy influence out here. I just made tacos the other night on Monday and called it Taco Tuesday. But it was made with Wagyu beef and fresh guac and salsa, Mexican cheese.
Chopped Wagyu beef?
Yes, chopped. Well, it was ground Wagyu.
Ground.
Yeah, I just sauteed it with onion and garlic, flavored, and piled it on. Ooh. Sometimes a taco is the most essential, necessary thing you need.
Joanna and I have tacos one night a week, almost always.
There you go.
And we almost always do it on Wednesday nights for some reason. So we call it taco. We call it taco night in America.
There you go. And do you remember, as a struggling actor, basically we had two choices. I mean, it was maybe a year where I had one meal a day, and that was Gray's papaya. Yep. Which whenever I go to New York, I have to have a slice just for that memory.
Yep.
And Ray's Pizza, the original one on 13th and 6th.
Right. The Gray's Papaya that I used to go to was 72nd and Broadway.
Oh, man, that was historic.
Yeah. Great.
Historic.
Juice bar, but pre-health food juice bar.
Yeah, you remember that papaya punch they made? It was very sugary and watery, but they said it had nutrients in it.
It's all bullshit, basically. Exactly. Well, Tony, you know what I'm going to do after we finish this? I'm going to write you and ask you for a recipe. Because I ask all my guests for a recipe. We include them on my website. And at some point, we're going to compile them all, and we're going to put them into a book.
There you go.
Put out a cookbook. Yeah.
Okay.
Usually I sum up the show with a question.
Mm-hmm.
And that question is this, and I have a feeling I'll know what it is, but I don't want to presuppose.
Okay.
If there's something that you experience in your life or have experienced in your life fairly recently, that brings back an earlier time, that is a smell, a taste, a location, that suddenly you go, oh God, that reminds me of this time in my life when I was sitting at the table, say with my aunt or with a friend, when I was a teenager or when I was at Boy Scout camp, whatever, that brings back that moment. What would that be?
Well, I told you about going to Japan as a Boy Scout. And I remember it was so untraditionally un-American, because breakfast would be a cold box, a bento box. I didn't know that time, with fried fish, right? And at first we were reluctant because it wasn't Americanized, but we ate it. I become a sushi aficionado. And my favorite place out here is a joint called Inimitable. I know the chef, I know the owner. And I always, when I go in there, I order omakase, which is chef's choice. They have a 2 Michelin star. I just keep eating, and for some reason it fills me up. And I've grown up to love sushi. At first I was resistant, but when it's made right, with the rice is the correct texture and temperature, there's nothing like it. And it's filling, but not overly filling. With a cold acai, it's like a flavor bomb going off. So one day when you're out here, I got to take you there, and also to my favorite Thai place called Jet Lada, which was also a Michelin star joint. This woman came to LA with nothing but her mother's recipes, and she was able to rent a storefront, and now she's on the cover of Food and Wine. The best seared sea bass.
There's something about bass, that's my flavor. That's my flavor fish. Is bass. It's either branzino or
branzino's great.
Regular sea bass. There's something about the heftiness of that flavor. It's not overwhelming. It's not fishy, but it does have a very distinctive texture and taste. It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tony Todd, thank you for joining me on Cooking by Heart.
I got it. Thank you very much. And what I told you about Dog Day Afternoon, I met. We put that brief conversation. You were brilliant in that. It was an actor's treatise.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
And you are an actor of many treatises in your life.
I hope we can chop it up on stage one day, man.
All right, let's do it. Anybody listening or watching, if you've got a theater and you need a Tony Todd and Chris Sarandon together, well,
please,
we're ready to team up. Thank you, Tony Todd.
Take
care.
Chris. Thank you, team. Peace.